citizen.
Out of many
We are world citizens, same vision is for equal rights and justice for the people them. What's happening to this beautiful world that we're living in? World citizen, lift up your voices.
Welcome to another episode of the People Powered Planet podcast, where we interview amazing solutionaries from around the world, people with innovative new concepts and new ideas for better ways to run our world. And today we have an extremely special guest, a filmmaker, journalist, and director of the acclaimed documentary Invisible Nation. We're next on Invisible Nation. And Vanessa Hope is also a podcaster. Vanessa, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. I am honored and delighted to be here.
That's great. Well, since we're on a podcast and we're filmmakers, let's get started with just a little bit about your role as a filmmaker. You have Dream of a Better World. You have an amazing guest. Tell us a little bit more about some of the amazing filmmakers and others that you've interviewed on your podcast.
Yes, well, I started a podcast that's called Be Hopeful Conversations on a Substack called Dream of a Better World, as you said, and also Hope for Film, which is my husband Ted Hope's podcast and Substack. And he's an author of a book that's also called Hope for Film. He's produced 100 movies, independent films, all of Ang Lee's first 8 films. So we're both filmmakers, but he had been doing interviews with filmmakers and that were written on his Substack. And I am good friends with a Taiwanese filmmaker, a woman named Shih So, who had this fantastic film on the Oscar campaign circuit last year. I highly recommend. That's called Left-Handed Girl. It's on Netflix. And I said to Ted, they made this film on an iPhone. They shot it on an iPhone. And we were hosting an Oscar lunch for Shih to support her film. So she was in town in LA, and I said to Ted, why don't we film an interview with Shih on iPhones? And then it can be like a part of a podcast. Because I had already done 6, I guess they were podcast conversations for Invisible Nation with a company who focuses on social impact out of London called Together Films, who are really wonderful. But they taught me how to be a moderator using these platforms like StreamYard, Riverside. And once I had done the interview with Shih about Left-Handed Girl, I realized that it's way too complicated to have to edit the footage from shooting on an iPhone, and we should just go to these platforms like Riverside. And once I started doing more interviews with Oscar contending filmmakers, the publicists and the distributors of these films started reaching out to me directly. So one of the interviews I did was with David Borenstein, who directed the Oscar-winning documentary of the year, which is called Mr. Nobody Against Putin. That's a really great documentary.
Fabulous documentary.
Yeah.
I highly recommend it. So relevant to us today.
There you go. But I also interviewed Kauthar Ben-Hania, who is also a documentary filmmaker, but she had her first fiction film called The Voice of Hind Rajab, which was based on true events. And it's a story of a 6-year-old Palestinian girl. Basically, she's stuck in this car throughout the film, unable to be rescued by the Red Crescent because the way the IDF controls the space and the way they can not really rescue their own people. It's horrific. It's a very powerful film that was Oscar nominated. Kauthar Ben-Hania is really talented. I'm very anti-war, like this group, so I feel it important to be able to have conversations with filmmakers, especially in documentary, because they've tended to put decades of their lives into researching, telling, and making these stories to share with the world. And having had a film travel the world and universities and been on the festival circuit, I understood the need for more journalists to provide these interviews and share podcast conversations because the filmmakers are the ones who have really invested the time and effort and thought into how their film can make a difference and make an impact. And most of the documentaries are social justice oriented. They do want to make a difference. So it's been really meaningful to do these Be Hopeful Conversations podcast.
Wow. Well, we're certainly looking forward a little later to going more into your incredible journey with Invisible Nation. But before I do
Thank
that,
you. Yeah.
I understand that with your love of film and interviewing filmmakers, that you've kind of always had that love, and that as a teenager, you watched the film Empire of the Sun, and you kind of identified with Christian Bale's character, the privileged child in pre-war Shanghai who was suddenly plunged into a Japanese internment camp. Now, how in the world did that relate to your family story?
Well, in my personal experience, I just found his character. Christian Bale is basically the same age as me, and the character was the same age I was when I saw the film. So I very much connected to his fear and loss when his parents were suddenly gone because they got taken to an internment camp first, and he was left to fend for himself. So that feeling of fending for yourself. But I know you're connecting this to what I wrote about, where my grandfather, my father's father, turns out to have been part of the air ground aid service that was the group who flew the planes into Shanghai and Hong Kong and elsewhere to rescue prisoners of war in these internment camps. And in the film Empire of the Sun, you don't see those scenes until the very, very end. So I did not actually know that my grandfather was one of the people flying those planes and rescuing people from the internment camps until the last, until maybe it was about 2019 or something. There's a writer who named Robert Kim who reached out, who's working on a big story, really a book about, I think he's calling them the China Team, but the group of Americans who were in China during World War II doing these rescue operations that my grandfather was a part of. So it
Wow.
just happened to be, he knew I was working on this documentary and had done a previous one about the US-China diplomatic relationship and wondered if I had more material to share, and then he shared what he had, which was really great.
Yeah, I loved reading that essay and looking at some of the old pictures that you discovered, and all this was like a secret. You didn't even know your grandfather was into this. It was all top secret. But
Right.
fortunately, you discovered it before he passed away, right?
Yeah, well, I know I never got to speak with my grandfather, but I did get to speak with my father about his father, his service in China, which no one knew about because it was top secret, because it was, I guess the predecessor to the CIA was the OSS. So they were really on a top secret mission and they kept those secrets through death. So it wasn't until after my grandfather died that this story came to me, and just before COVID, during COVID, sometime around then. And I got to share it with my father.
Perfect.
Then my father died in 2021, and I got all the photo albums, which I do share a lot of photos in the article I just wrote, but I hadn't looked in depth in any way until my sister was asking me to look for something in the albums. And as I was searching, I came across that, telegram from T.A. Sung, who is related to TV Sung and the Sung sisters, who were the wealthiest family in China, but who were the two of the sisters married Sun Yat-sen, the founder of the Republic of China, wanted democracy in China, and Chiang Kai-shek, who was his general, who after Sun Yat-sen died, Chiang Kai-shek took over the Nationalist Party, the Kuomintang KMT, and they all fled to Taiwan. So there are these historical connections that I discovered looking through these albums, which now I'm going to go through in much more detail to find. There are many photos and details. My grandmother, my father's mother, kept really meticulous records, like photos. They were in India, they were in Indonesia, Sumatra, Bali, they were all over the world. And there's a lot to learn.
It's so rewarding to discover all those old photos and films. When we were making the film that inspired this podcast, called "The World Is My Country" with Gary Davis, when we first interviewed him on stage, we didn't know that there was an incredible wealth of documentary pictures and photos and films of every step of his journey. But when we started doing the film research all over the world, and in Paris, in New York, in London, everywhere, we began to uncover every single step turned out to be documented, filmed, or photographed. It was just mind-boggling. So
Great.
I love and how much joy that must give you to discover that about your own family.
Yes.
And that takes me, because this journey took you into China, to the incredible documentary that you've created, and that I've understand has had some. You were at the Cannes Film Festival. You're at and in fact, we'll get to the big surprise of one of the recent showings. But first, tell us about the film.
So I, made a document. I'm very interested in diplomacy. Again, that anti-war view of the world. How can we improve diplomacy to avert war, which is really what it should do, build relationships between people in different countries. And I had worked at a think tank in New York City called the Council on Foreign Relations. Actually, my boss from my time at the Council on Foreign Relations just came over for lunch. She happened to be in Los Angeles. This is not where she lives, and that was a real pleasure to reconnect with her. She's at the Hoover Institution at Stanford now. Elizabeth Economy, absolutely brilliant, written many books on China. But my first mentor at the Council on Foreign Relations was a man named Jerome Allen Cohen, who lived to the age of 95, and he only died last year, or was this or last year? I wrote a piece about it that's in China Wire and Foreign Affairs. But he's the first person who studied Chinese on a grant and went to China to practice law. And he brought me into the U.S. ambassador's residence under Bush and George W. Bush, not H.W. And Sandy Rant was our ambassador then. And I just thought, this is such an interesting window into the world of diplomacy and U.S.-China relations. And I managed to gain access for my first documentary to former President Obama's U.S. ambassador to China, John Huntsman, and followed him and his very beautiful family all over China in ways that I had never seen the country before. And I went to China first in 1991 and then continued going to learn Mandarin Chinese. And then I had landed in Taipei, Taiwan to study Mandarin as a student again, 1995 to 96, which was the year they became a democracy, the year they held their first direct presidential elections. And that was the first time I thought, wow, I'd love to film this. And I borrowed my Chinese language teacher's camera to run around filming inauguration weekend of their first directly elected president, Li Donghui. But my first film, which looked at the U.S.-China diplomatic relationship, only had a little mention of Taiwan in terms of how the U.S. government sells them weapons, and that upsets the Chinese government. And I knew there was a much larger story in Taiwan. And when my first film, which is called All Eyes and Ears, came out in 2015, I was watching developments in Taiwan. I knew there was a possibility that they might elect a first female president. And so I am in many China-related, Taiwan-related groups of people who are in every possible field, and, diplomacy, law, business, all of it, the arts. And so I was invited to join by one of them, an international delegation to monitor that the elections were free and fair in Taipei. as a way to be on the ground when they were having these elections where they might elect a first female president. And I teamed up I'm friends with a journalist named Mike Chinoy, who was the Beijing bureau chief for CNN during Tiananmen Square, actually. And then he moved to Hong Kong. And now he's in Taiwan doing interesting work. Mike Chinoy is an excellent journalist. He said, meet these DPs in Taipei, directors of photography. They'll work with you filming on the ground. And that's how we started. I managed to meet all the different political parties on this 1 week trip in January of 2016. So the first film on US China came out. I'm trying to figure out the Taiwan story. Will Taiwan elect a first female president? I don't know. I show up. I'm filming all the different parties. I'm filming their voting process, which is really interesting. They take elections very seriously, and like 80% of the population turns out to vote. And I'm there in the crowd when President Tsai wins. And it's so exciting. The people are so vocal about we are Taiwanese, and they're shining their flat, the phone light. Everyone's using their phone, and it's light up Taiwan, and it's again wildly historic. I'm thinking, I mean, yes, I intentionally went that time. I just happened to be a student the year that they became a democracy. Now I'm in Taiwan a few decades later, and they're electing a first female president. And that's how this started. I then got the idea, if I can gain access to President Tsai Ing-wen, then maybe there's a way to build a story about what Taiwan's point of view is on what they want from the world and how they manage the US-China relationship. And so I got a grant
So
to focus on peace and security, and that started it.
great. Well, that's exactly where we want to go. I want to go with a little bit more about the a brief synopsis of the actual film and what's in it, and then move to talking about Taiwan's remarkable democratic journey and the lessons from World War II and the struggle for freedom that had, and how that relates to the rise of authoritarianism around the world. But before we get to
Sure.
questions, first, what's the synopsis of the film?
Well, Invisible Nation has access to Taiwan's first female president, Tsai Ing-wen, as a window into the story of their democracy. So I cover her 2 terms, but also how, in such a short period of time, from 1996 with their first elections through 2016 with electing her, they became such a powerful, vibrant democracy and threw off the shackles of authoritarianism because they had been under martial law with a military dictatorship under Chiang Kai-shek for 38 years, which is the longest period of martial law outside of the one suffered by the people in Syria. So Tsai Ing-wen is not a diva. She did not want a biopic. She said, yes, you can have access to me, but there are many people around me in the administration, on the street. I hope you give the full picture of what makes our democracy so unique and so strong. And it was incredible to follow her 2 terms because she did a remarkable amount. She was very brave in a very quick period of time. She did transitional justice with their authoritarian past, the way they did Truth and Reconciliation in South Africa. She opened up the files for people for what had happened to them under their dictatorship. I mean, I think part of what makes their democracy so strong in Taiwan is the awareness, historically, it's recent, of what it is to live under one party rule, authoritarianism, military dictatorship. That is very present. It's not ancient history. And it's not like in the United States, so many people born here, living here, don't have a sense of what it is to really be in an authoritarian dictatorship. So that's an advantage that has helped them to strengthen their democracy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why one of the reasons why the film is so relevant today, because it's something that we're kind of learning and facing right now, and we have to. And your film really gives us some powerful examples of ways we can deal with this. So before I move on to talking about uh, some of the impact in that, let me just ask you first, tell me well, first of all, I understand that part of your objective is to bring people together. And one of the things that Taiwan did is to bring people together across opposite sides of political issues. Tell us a little bit more about one of the key speakers in your film, Audrey Tang, and what is the experiment, a whole new way of doing democracy?
Yeah, Audrey Tang was the first digital minister of Taiwan, and at the time was calling herself transgender. I think she's non-binary and goes by she. She's brilliant, self-taught, and really focused on ways in which Taiwan could be powerful through a digital democracy, basically connecting to other democracies digitally and less concerned with traditional ways of diplomacy, because it's in this movie Invisible Nation, but Taiwan has one of the most complicated diplomatic histories because initially the United States government recognized Taiwan under Chiang Kai-shek as the Republic of China that Sun Yat-sen had created, and it was known as Free China, even though they were not keeping the people free. They did not liberate the people of Taiwan. They put them under martial law, under dictatorship. But they were not communist. And at the time, the US government's focus in foreign policy was containing communism, which is what Mao Zedong was espousing in China, starting with 1949, the founding of the People's Republic of China. So you have this complicated scenario where Nixon and Kissinger then go to meet Mao and Zhou Enlai in 72 and open relations with China, reopen that relationship, and are asked to de-recognize Taiwan. So Taiwan was in the United Nations. They were part of the UN Security Council. They were recognized by Churchill and Roosevelt, and everybody embraced them as free China. But then starting in the 70s, and it was actually President Carter who closed the deal in 1979, he said, we were officially recognizing the People's Republic of China, de-recognizing Taiwan. We heard the People's Republic of China's government's point of view that there's one China and Taiwan is part of China. We hear them. We don't agree. We hope that they will resolve their differences peacefully. That's the Shanghai Communique. The Taiwan Relations Act was a piece of legislation from Congress at the time, who were horrified that the US was abandoning Taiwan in 1979. So they said, we will defend Taiwan. We will supply weapons to Taiwan so that it can defend itself, so it has deterrence, not so that it provokes anything, because the dream of Chiang Kai-shek had been take China.
Mhm.
That dream really died with him, and then his son allowed for more opening up and reform within Taiwan. But the challenge for people is understanding that even if it's still got this old name, Republic of China, Taiwan, it is not the same as the People's Republic of China. The People's Republic of China claims Taiwan as their territory, as a province of China. And the people of Taiwan have been trying to get out the word that the truth and the facts are what's in Invisible Nation, which is they are not part of China. They have never been. They have their own government, their own currency, their own military, their own diplomacy. They are being constrained by China, who's financially buying off their diplomatic allies, reducing them down to something like 12 on the world stage. Officially, they're very at risk of losing all their diplomatic allies, the official version of them. But so this is Audrey Tang's genius, I think, is to form these other relationships that are not on the official or unofficial diplomatic level, but digitally, and building ties. There's a lot of relationship building that Taiwan does, and a lot of favor that Taiwan deserves internationally for all the good that it does and all that it can contribute,
Yeah,
including as a beacon of democracy. Yeah.
I understand that uh, because Taiwan, it's called you call it invisible nation because, for instance, if a Taiwanese person goes to the airport, tries to find their passport, it clicks down the list of nations. It's not there. It's invisible.
Yeah.
It's not. It's
Yeah.
not there. And
Yeah.
so, in international conferences, they wouldn't allow them to enter. So one of the things that Audrey Tang did is create a little robot with a screen on the front of it, and the robot waltzed into the room, and the robot talks to the whole conference and carries on just like if Taiwan had their delegate. And they really, found a fantastic solution. But the other thing that intrigued me totally about what Audrey Tang is doing is that, right now in America, we see this win-lose democracy. 51% win, 49% lose, and then people are divided. You vote for people, you don't even like the person, but the other guy's worse. So you don't vote for what you really want. You vote against what you don't want. And that's a race to the bottom. It's a race to bring the worst and the worst of everybody. Now, Gary Davis in our film talked about how to develop a system that brings out the highest and best wisdom of each individual and coalesces that into a better way to govern. Well, what they've done is actually did that in Taiwan. Here they had an incredible diversity of people on opposite sides of issues, bitterly divided, sometimes at war with each other. And they created this kind of digital interactive system that didn't allow people to attack each other, but rather kind of brought together what is it that people want? How do they solve this problem or that problem? And they actually began to find commonality. And they actually began to find that almost every single challenge that would have divided people, if you actually use these right digital tools, could actually bring people together, that we really at heart all really do want the same thing. Can
Yeah.
one example of how they were able to take an issue that seemed totally divisive and come to a common and clever way to solve it.
Well, I know from the long interviews I've done with Audrey that the humor over rumor was one of her tactics. So during COVID, and by the way, Taiwan has the world's best healthcare system that's also the world's least expensive. And they're always obviously on the front lines of whatever is coming from China in terms of SARS or COVID. They're right there and they have a lot of interaction. So they have to be very prepared. And they did an incredible job of containing COVID, of creating vaccines that they were willing to share with the rest of the world. They said Taiwan can help. But the humor over rumor had something to do with everyone was afraid. Just there were basic human needs with like toilet paper or something. And in Chinese, in Mandarin, it was getting confused. There was like a homonym that it sounded like another word. And so they played with it. Like Audrey Tang managed to dissipate people's fears that there was going to be a run on toilet paper in all the stores and you wouldn't have enough and you needed to stockpile it, and also use humor to lighten the mood and let people know the government was there to take care of them and they were going to be okay and they could rely on each other even in these COVID circumstances where you're wearing a mask and you're but you need to talk to Audrey for the exact details. That's a vague memory of an example of the way that her digital ministry could communicate with people, again, using the internet, using text messages, whatever it was, to do humor over rumor. Because people were hearing rumors about the dangers of COVID and they wouldn't get their supplies and they shouldn't go to the store. And this was just helping everyone understand what was really going on, but doing it with humor.
Well, so remarkably, Taiwan had only 7 COVID deaths, unusual in the whole wide world.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about the rise of authoritarianism around the world.
Yeah.
And oh, wait, before we do that, let's on your film, I wanted to say one more thing. Audrey
Yeah.
Tang was talking about bringing people together across the divides. I understand that you had a remarkable bipartisan meeting showing of your film right in the U.S. Capitol. Tell us about that.
That was just on Thursday last week, which was June 4th, which was the anniversary of the Tiananmen massacre in Beijing, which when I was a student and I first went to Beijing, it was 1991 was 2 years after Tiananmen Square. So I could already feel how powerful the government in China was in suppressing people and making them afraid to speak up or even be on the street at the time. That's what it felt like. And you all know the Tiananmen massacre was horrific, and that's when people in China were trying to demand greater freedom and less corruption, and they completely got cracked down on, and then supported by other authoritarian-minded governments around the world and corporations who, of course, is very convenient. If people are controlled and controllable, then you can exploit them for whatever factory labor, etc. So that was an interesting date. But the fact is, Taiwan has always been a bipartisan issue. It has always been Republicans and Democrats caring about Taiwan, supporting Taiwan, wanting to show up and speak up for Taiwan. It's a pretty clear situation for Congress. And we were really honored. It took 2.5 years, I would say, on the road and coming out on PBS. We've been on PBS since the beginning of May. We're on their streaming platform too. So reaching 100 million households across the US is fantastic and exciting for a film people didn't think could even get made, let alone reach an audience. I would credit my husband again for standing by my side and helping to make sure this happened. But yes, bipartisan all the way. And because it's a bipartisan issue, it can draw Congress together for other reasons, as you're saying. I mean, it feels bigger than what is there in terms of a partisan divide. So we screened at the U.S. Capitol, and I was, told that the Congress people who could show up would be restricted in time because there was a Ukraine aid vote going on. In fact, they ended up passing a vote for aid for Ukraine and Taiwan, so that was significant. It was a big deal that night. But we all had prepared remarks. I was on a panel with a few other invited guests, and I reached halfway through my remarks to the point where I said something like, of all the places we've played, because we've played in the German Parliament, in the Reichstag building, we played in the UK Congress, we've played at the Oslo Freedom Forum, many human rights forums, we played at film festivals for universities, special events all over the world. I said, this opportunity to screen at the US Capitol is probably the most consequential. Boom. In walks Nancy Pelosi, Representative Ted Lieu, 6 other Congress people, like as if I had cued them to walk into the room, and the whole crowd in the theater who had just, none of us knew what was going to happen that night. None of them confirmed. I didn't know that Speaker Pelosi would show up, let alone make remarks. And we're sitting at a long table with microphones on this panel. And all of a sudden, she walks in as if I've just cued her and introduced her. And then she takes the podium and she makes remarks about Taiwan and the importance of it and its democracy and supporting it and this film. And then Ted Lieu makes remarks. I mean, it was really exciting. Everybody in the audience, again, I keep pulling up a phone, but everyone starts filming and videoing. Everyone suddenly felt very excited. It was thrilling. I mean, because I'm in the film business, right? But in DC, it's really the politicians who have the celebrity power. They make people very excited just to see them and talk to them when they walk in a room. So it was a big deal.
Well, after being at Cannes and screening at Oxford and all those places, what a grand finale to actually be able to screen at the Capitol and have key people involved, and then actually get funding for Taiwan out of it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
For your
Yeah.
work. So that
Yeah.
leads right into a very important question. What is the role of storytelling and film and citizen engagement in defending democracy?
Couldn't possibly be more important. The role of citizen, probably the most important, and storytelling, especially for a country like Taiwan, which is so misunderstood and whose story is dominated in the mainstream press and controlled by the Chinese government, it's their best defense. That's what there's a character in our film who was really tremendous to follow and have access to named B. Kim Shao, who, when I first met her, was a legislator for a town in Taiwan called Hualien, which is on the East Coast, Northeast. It gets hit really hard by typhoons. And she just kept rising while I was filming. She ended up being Taiwan's de facto ambassador to the United States. So I filmed her in that capacity. Now she's Taiwan's vice president. And it was also remarkable. It's the first time. So the Democratic Progressive Party is Taiwan's first native political party. And the president, Tsai Ing-wen, had been in charge of the DPP, Democratic Progressive Party, before she became president. And she was chosen for these roles, but she had Bi Kim Shao in her sights. Bi Kim Shao also helped pass same-sex marriage. So, it was President Tsai who made her ambassador. And it's to President Tsai's credit that the Democratic Progressive Party, for the first time in history, held on for 3 terms. So not just President Tsai herself's 2 terms, but President Tsai's vice president in her second term, William Lai Ching-te, is the current president of Taiwan, and Bi Kim is his vice president. And Bi Kim gave us this quote when we came out in theaters in Taiwan last year. President Tsai gave us beautiful quotes and put it on Facebook, but Bi Kim Shao at some point said something like, this movie is Taiwan's best defense. Storytelling is Taiwan's best defense. People knowing the truth about Taiwan and sharing it, because the more people understand that it would be an international war crime if China invaded Taiwan or blockaded Taiwan, that Taiwan is not China's territory to do with what it wants, the better the people of Taiwan feel supported and able to continue to hold on to their democracy and all that they've built. And if worse comes to worse, they will be supported in the region and by the United States, I assume. But it's a very delicate situation. Yeah.
Wow. This movie is Taiwan's best defense. Wow. I love that. What a great statement. And, actually, movies have been the best defense for planet Earth. Melanie and I are impact producers, television event about
Yeah.
the amazing impact of the ABC show The Day After. I was the nuclear war researcher on that. And that documentary shows that literally changed Reagan's mind from war fighting and thinking he could fight and win a nuclear war, which his generals like Danny Graham and other people were egging him on and telling him to do it, to realize that you can't win a nuclear war. I made another
Yeah.
film called War Without Winners, and so he turned that around, and he began to negotiate de-escalating and bringing down the arms and having arms agreements, and it all was because of a movie. A movie did it. Movies have
Great.
incredible power. I notice a very
Yep.
important question from Lena Pena, a Rotarian. What can ordinary people do to build a more peaceful, democratic future?
I think that we can contribute to building a more peaceful, democratic future by supporting each other in a fully inclusive way, recognizing that women need equality, that we can't discriminate against anyone based on gender or race or ethnicity, that the more we include people, the stronger and better we are. And so whether it's starting and it's making sure we vote and pay attention to who our candidates are and let them represent our diversity in their diversity, I do think that builds a stronger democracy. But to support each other in our communities, in our neighborhoods, and let it build out from there. I understand that Gary Davis had very big global ideas, and I love that. I mean, it's true. One of the absurdities of Taiwan's situation is that once upon a time, as we said, it was a founding member of the United Nations on the UN Security Council. Today, if you hold a Taiwan passport, you are not allowed in the front door because China controls on the UN Security Council and doesn't want anyone from Taiwan coming in. So it's they don't want to acknowledge reality. And I think that the challenge we have today is how powerful authoritarian-minded leaders are and how their main focus is controlling how and what we think. I mean, it is about the media. It is about, for China, controlling Taiwan's story, for whatever authoritarian leader we're talking about, controlling the narrative and not allowing a free press, censoring facts and truth so that it doesn't differ from their propaganda. All of that is so dangerous to democracy. Democracy needs strong press. It needs journalists. It needs storytellers and freedom of the press and the truth. And so, I mean, depending on what your profession is, I think just knowing what the foundations of democracy are and how to contribute and not being afraid to contribute is key.
Well, we see all those things happening in the rise of authoritarianism in our own country. And that's one of
Yeah.
the reasons why I so wanted to have you on our podcast, because this is an incredible story of citizen power and democracy facing
Yeah.
overwhelming authoritarian odds. And we need
Yeah.
those kind of stories to empower us and energize us.
Yeah.
Gary Davis in our film, The World Citizen #1, makes the point that the whole nation state system, it's kind of insane. I mean, look at
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
wonderful. Our
Right.
astronaut said, we're all crew, we're all crew.
Yeah.
And Einstein warned that this current nation state system would lead to barbarism, war, and really the demise
Yeah.
of life on Earth. I mean, we're seeing us plunging toward ecocide and nuclear war as these wars race out of control. And the key to solving that really is citizen power. I mean, what is the superpower? It's we, the people of the planet. And
Yeah.
every single, almost every constitution says we, the people, created
Right.
created this government. We're the people. We, the people.
Yeah.
So, and yet there's no way. And the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which you see, and when you watch the movie, Gary helped kind of trigger the final passage.
Yeah.
That his movement of huge number of people that help that what happens is by raising our sights to the global level above the nations that divide us, we are the superpower that can be unleashed. And one reason they keep us all divided and separated, and they're the bad guys. Doesn't matter who the bad guys are. Oh, it's
Right.
those terrible people. Those terrible people. It doesn't matter which one.
Yeah. Yeah.
You keep us divided and fighting with each other, then you can stay in power and you can amass all the money and power. And so we're ruled by money and power,
That's it.
not by any. I mean, our democracy becomes totally a sham
Yes.
unless we can somehow find a way to build citizen power. And your movie gives us clues to how to do that. So
Yeah.
I really welcome us all to watch that and to begin to think about what do we do about that rise of authoritarianism in our own country and how we can move on. And
Yeah.
while we're answering that, I do want to remind people again, if you have questions or comments, do go ahead and raise your digital hand. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to share that when I was at the Copenhagen Democracy Summit in 2025, that was the last time I got to see President Tsai in person. But I was really impressed with the citizen power and the sense of the importance of being a citizen among the people in Denmark, that it is impressive. They are proud of the democracy that they've built. It's similar in Taiwan, the sense of we know we did it. I think that there is already in our country such a feeling of remove. There's such an astronomical gap in wealth between the tech billionaires, trillionaires, gazillionaires at the top and everybody else. And they have, as you said, it's money and politics, so much power in our government. And no one feels empowered to do enough anymore. I mean, yes, we vote, but are we being fully represented in Washington? It doesn't feel like it anymore. And in these smaller countries, which is interesting to think about the power and importance of smaller countries, as the Prime Minister of Canada, Mark Carney, was talking about, they matter. Like, in some sense, the superpower idea of China and the US and their competition is really bad for everybody. And I think the idea of a global citizenry is brilliant. As we've talked about, there's the Global Citizen group that puts on music concerts. That's wonderful. I know people involved. There's all these different organizations and summits around the world focusing on it, but it's a great vision and ideal to believe in and fight for.
So at this point in our program, we turn it back over to Melanie Bennett, our amazing producer of this program and of the movie, The World is My Country. And there's even a special page that's The World is My Country / Rotary, lowercase r for Rotary. Rotarians are sponsored showing our film, The World is My Country, on PBS stations across the country. And now that the Corporation for Public Broadcasting has been unfunded, stations are hungry for more programming. So NETA came back to us and said, would you like to redo your film? It's so relevant today. And so our film is going out on PBS July 1st. I'm so glad that you're on PBS too. It's great to have us reaching that special audience. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie.
Well, thank you, Arthur, and a huge, ginormous thank you, Vanessa.
Of course.
Oh my gosh, you know everything. It feels like you've got this down. It's all figured out. This is the answer. Thank you so much. I want to deeply thank you for your
Thank
film.
you so much.
Well, you're inspiring. I mean, the adage, courage is contagious. So important.
Good.
So important. We see people be brave.
I think I'm passing it on from Taiwan, Melanie. I feel like everything Arthur just said about the way they're a beacon of democracy and citizen power is something I got to experience up close, firsthand, on the ground. And I was so grateful for it. And I just wanted to be able to share it. So I'm glad it's inspiring.
Yeah. That feeling that people feel important. I mean,
yeah.
That is such a, I mean, it's actually just a trick.
Yeah.
It's a trick to get us to feel that we can't do anything. We're one person.
Right.
You're bringing tears to my eyes. Oh my God.
Yeah, no. Everything you guys are saying is right. Yeah.
Yeah. So people.
Yep.
Let's remember, we are powerful. We could get together. We can do anything.
Yep.
And just a dynamic example of this. And so please watch the movie. I put it in the chat. Lon, I just wanted to read what Lon had to say. Another dream, empower women, educate women. So yes, okay.
Yeah.
That's another little trick. Take out half the population. Oh, you don't need to decide anything. I'll distract you. Don't be a part of these decision-making things. So
right.
Women, I mean, right now we know there's a spectrum of gender. So everybody's included when I say you're not out there helping to make decisions in your community. If you're not involved in your community, your voice has been taken away. So please, I know we all have different interests. We all have things we like to do. We're all here for a purpose. But yes, please do get involved when a vote comes up, when something's happening in your neighborhood. Get to know your neighbors, get in community, be with others, and use your voice. I don't think I finished, sorry. A good start is giving schoolgirls in the poorest nations a free washable menstrual kit. Yes.
Yeah.
And teach everyone how to make the kits, and you buy them. Yes, yes, yes. And then the girls stay in school. Your period should not stop you to do anything. You should be able to talk about it. Period, menstrual, period. Okay, now I'm going to pass it back to Arthur so you can do the last word, and put in invisiblenation.net, Okay, and then we'll hope to see you soon, Vanessa. Now back to Arthur. Arthur, take it away.
Thank you so much. And I noticed that Pressy asked the question, what is Future Wave? Future Wave, the WAVE stands for Working for Alternatives to Violence Through Entertainment. That's what you're doing, entertaining people and then educating them on alternatives to violence. Again, I want to thank you for an extraordinary work that you're doing in the world, for an extraordinary program with us.
Thank you so much. Really wonderful. And so deeply appreciate all of your support and being here among this community. I think our values are very in sync. And I really appreciate the work you all are doing and your movie. And I look forward to having you on my podcast.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Join
you.
us on the People Powered Planet podcast.
World citizen, lift up your voices. Oh, you know we got something to say. All we need is the same directions, heading in one way.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video.